Teresa Scalf was an incredibly loving person. She turned that trait into a career, becoming a nurse and ultimately inspiring the majority of her family to also work in healthcare. In 1986, Teresa was 29 years old and working at Lakeland Regional Health Medical Center in Lakeland, Florida. She lived in an apartment with her 8-year-old son. On October 27, 1986, Teresa's mother Betty received a phone call telling her that Teresa had not shown up for her shift at the hospital. Concerned, Betty drove over to her daughter's apartment around 10:30 p.m. Teresa did not answer the door, so Betty used a credit card to manipulate the lock on the door and get inside. When she got inside, Betty discovered a bloody scene and her daughter's lifeless body. Fortunately, Teresa's young son was not at home. Teresa had been stabbed to death and nearly decapitated as a result of the depth of the wounds to her neck. She also had defensive wounds showing that she had fought back against her killer. While Teresa's fight to survive did not save her life, it would ultimately identify her killer. Teresa's case did go cold, but police did not give up on it, even after decades. Cold case detective Matthew Newbold was assigned to the case in 2015. He kept Teresa's picture in his office and promised her sister Pam that he would not retire until he solved the case. He was able to uphold that promise. On October 16, 2023, Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd announced that Detective Newbold had identified Teresa's killer as Donald Douglas. Douglas had been 33 years old at the time of the murder and had lived directly behind Teresa's apartment. He had been interviewed as a part of the routine canvass of Teresa's apartment complex, but had never been a person of interest in the case. He could not be arrested for the murder because he died of natural causes at the age of 54. He had never been arrested for anything during his lifetime. 2 types of blood had been identified from the crime scene, Teresa's and her killer's, because she had fought against him hard enough to make him bleed. DNA was extracted from that blood sample and run through the combined DNA index system sometime in the early 2000s, but no match had been found. Detective Newbold began working with Othram Inc. in 2022 to trace the unknown DNA through commercial DNA databases. Extensive genealogical work revealed that a third cousin of the killer had an affair with a neighbor in 1949, which resulted in the birth of a child. Tracing that child's family led to the identification of Douglas as a potential suspect. His remains had been cremated following his death, so Detective Newbold had no way to obtain a direct DNA sample from him or his body. Douglas did have a son, and Detective Newbold contacted him. The son was certain that his father could not have killed anyone, but was still fully cooperative with the investigation and provided a sample of his DNA. Analysis confirmed the biological relationship between him and the person whose blood was found at the crime scene. Douglas's son was shocked and horrified when he learned of what his father had done. Teresa's mother Betty did live to see her daughter's killer identified. "I'm 84 years old. I lived to see this done. I think that's why I lived so long," she said following the identification of Douglas. In 1981, 14-year-old Karen Alexander and her 13-year-old brother Gordon lived in the College Hill neighborhood of Texarkana, Arkansas with their parents and were members of Trinity Baptist Church. Karen was an 8th grader at College Hill Junior High School. She was a well-behaved student who loved spelling and English. She wanted to be a nurse when she grew up. Karen was very soft-spoken, but was incredibly kind and sweet to those she did talk to. She did not like to draw a lot of attention to herself, but had a few close friends. She enjoyed trading stickers and having sleepovers with them. Gordon was far more extroverted than his older sister. The 6th grade student at Washington Middle School had a gentle but outgoing spirit. He always had a smile on his face and said good morning to everyone at school. He He was not simply loud, talking just for the sake of talking, but genuinely kind to everyone around him. He gave compliments freely too, and made an effort to get to know everyone he met. Gordon had dreams of one day playing football, despite a lifetime of health problems. These health concerns and their effects, like a special shoe he had to wear to account for a difference between the length of his legs, sometimes made him a target for bullies, but their actions did not tarnish his spirit. Gordon had been born with a congenital heart defect that required him to undergo open heart surgery as an infant. Later in his life, he suffered a stroke, which resulted in the left side of his body being weakened. In April of 1981, Gordon was confined to a wheelchair. He had broken his hip approximately 3 months earlier when he fell off his bicycle and was undergoing physical therapy. He and Karen spent the night of April 7th alone at home. Their mother, Vera, had been admitted to Wadley Hospital the previous weekend as a mental health patient. Their father, Weldon, worked the night shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. at a local tire factory, Cooper Tire. Weldon called police at 7:15 a.m. on April 8th, telling them that he had come home from work to find his front door open and his 2 children having been attacked. His son was dead in the kitchen, and his daughter was on her bed near the living room, potentially still alive, but seriously injured. When police officers arrived 9 minutes later, Weldon told them that he had pulled a dull knife from Karen's body and placed it on a nearby bookshelf. Gordon had sustained 16 stab wounds and was deceased, but Karen was still clinging to life, despite the fact that she had been beaten, strangled, and stabbed several times in the face. It would later be determined that she had been raped. She was taken to St. Michael Hospital, where she remained in a coma until she died 3 days later. Her autopsy concluded that her cause of death was a stab wound to her right eye that struck her brain. The Texarkana police created a special investigative team to work the case, and they worked around the clock. All days off have been canceled. We will work full-time until this case is solved. The person who did this is an animal. We hope the courts will treat them as they would a mad dog, Texarkana Police Detective Jimmy Cowart said at the time. However, the case went cold despite their efforts. Henry Lee Lucas would later claim responsibility for the murders, but his confession, like almost all of the hundreds of confessions he made to garner attention and special treatment from law enforcement, was proven to be a lie. Gordon and Karen's mother, Vera, took her own life just 3 years after her children were killed, at the age of 37. Calvin Seward was a patrolman with the Texarkana Police Department who was assigned to the Alexander investigation shortly after the murders occurred. The case was a difficult one for him, as he had children the same age as Karen and Gordon, including a daughter who was one of Karen's classmates. Officer Seward was promoted to sergeant and then captain with the department before he retired from it in 2004. He went on to work with the U.S. Marshals and the Texarkana Airport Police for another 18 years before retiring again. Captain Seward had never lost his desire to solve Karen and Gordon's case. In February of 2022, he received permission to work on it on a volunteer basis. He conducted numerous interviews and reviewed several pieces of forensic evidence. He then began working with forensic criminologist Dr. Todd Steffi, as well as Kelly Dixon, a DNA scientist at the Arkansas State Crime Lab. DNA testing had last been done on the evidence from the Alexander case in 2012, and the 3 of them agreed that the evidence should be retested based on advancements made in the field since then. DNA was found under both Gordon and Karen's fingernails, which had been preserved. DNA was also found in semen on Karen's bedsheets. This DNA was compared to Karen and Gordon's DNA profiles. Based on the amount of DNA the suspect shared with them, it was determined that the DNA came from their father. Further investigative efforts supported Weldon Alexander being his children's killer. Trace evidence was found on Karen's body and in dried blood on Gordon's hands. It contained fibers, brass, copper, and zinc, all of which Weldon Alexander would have been exposed to at work at a tire manufacturer. Police had initially believed that the children had been killed while their father was at his overnight shift. However, Captain Seward's investigation revealed that this timeline was incorrect. He learned from the officer who first responded to the scene that Gordon's body had been cold to the touch when he arrived. Police had also originally believed that Karen and Gordon had let their killer inside and had been visiting with them before they were killed. There had been no signs of forced entry, and Police Captain Jimmy Cowart stated that he believed Karen had changed out of her nightgown and into a pair of shorts and a shirt because someone had come to the house after she had gone to bed. It was determined that Karen and Gordon had in fact been found in the clothes they had been wearing the previous day. Knowing all this, Captain Seward now believed that Weldon Alexander had attacked his children prior to leaving for work and called police pretending he found them like that when he returned from his overnight shift. It appeared that when Weldon began raping his daughter Karen, his son Gordon, despite being in a wheelchair, tried to protect her and was killed for his bravery. Weldon Alexander had died on November 6, 2014 at the age of 80, and as such, could not be arrested for killing his own children. However, Captain Seward and Dr. Steffi still submitted an affidavit of probable cause to the Miller County prosecuting attorney, naming him as the most probable suspect in the case. In a letter dated October 11, 2023, Miller County prosecuting attorney Connie Mitchell stated, "After reviewing your comprehensive report and meeting with you personally to discuss the case, your findings and theories, it is my opinion that Weldon Alexander, father to Karen Alexander and Gordon Alexander, is the sole viable suspect in their murder. I believe probable cause exists for the issuance of a warrant for 2 counts of capital murder. While this warrant could not be issued, finally having answers in the case will hopefully be beneficial to those who loved Karen and Gordon and never gave up on solving their murders." At the press conference announcing the resolution of the investigation, Police Chief Michael Cram stated, "It is our hope that the friends and remaining family of Gordon and Karen Alexander may find some peace in knowing that scientific and circumstantial evidence has been revealed sufficient to resolve this 42-year-old case."